Hello, I'm George Liston, CA. Welcome to Dialogue, a program that explores the world of ideas and issues in international affairs, history, and culture. One of the most promising initiatives in the field of international development is the International Fellowships Program of the Ford Foundation, first launched in 2001. Recognizing that a country's most valuable resource is its human talent, the program has supported hundreds of promising young men and women from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Russia in their efforts at earning advanced degrees from leading institutions worldwide. Now, this program goes beyond traditional scholarship programs in important ways. For example, its awardees have demonstrated both superior social commitment as well as academic excellence, and they're pledged to return and continue helping their societies when their studies are complete. Perhaps most excitingly, they represent groups that have not traditionally had access to advanced education. And while the numbers of program alumni now surpass 1,000, each individual story is compelling. And today we will meet 3 current IFP Fellows. My guests are Jing Kong of China, Godwin Irokaba from Nigeria, and Lwin Pedro Mateo, who comes from Guatemala. I should also welcome at this time Katrina Street, who is here to help us with the program. And let's get underway. Let me begin with you, Godwin, because quite frankly, I find your story an extremely compelling personal one. I understand that you, as a child, began to dream of attending Gallaudet College. And as I say, I think that is extraordinarily moving. Why has that been such an important lifelong goal of yours?
Thank you very much. When I was a child, my school principal was from Gallaudet University and went to Nigeria. Well, as a deaf person, I was thinking that there's not much out there. But then I saw people from America who came to Nigeria, and they had studied at Gallaudet University. So that planted seeds of curiosity for me to go to Gallaudet University. One day in my mind, I could see me there to see exactly what it would look like at Gallaudet University.
I have to say I'm very glad I asked that question. That is a very moving answer, that it meant so much to you then, and I suspect now. And I know, Godwin, that one of the reasons that you're particularly happy to be at Gallaudet is that you want to develop a new approach to deaf education in Nigeria. I'd love for you to tell us a bit about what that might be. I mean, I understand that the use of American Sign Language and English are important parts, but what does it amount to? What will it be like? What would you want to do?
That is a good question. In Nigeria, we use an approach that's called Seeing Exact English, or SEE. That approach, however, does not really address the development of language in deaf children. The deaf children, they have their own natural or native language. And by trying to use SEE or C, that is not really helping them to develop their natural language as they acquire English. So the new approach is called ASL, English Bilingualism. That's a model that helps individual children to develop their first language while at the same time developing a second language. So this helps them to learn much easier than what they're used to by seeing that exact signed English.
That's a very helpful answer. In other words, you use the acquisition of a first language to learn a second. Is that correct?
Exactly, exactly. We would like to see the children, the deaf children, to have a threshold level in their first language first. If they don't reach that threshold level first, then the second language would be difficult.
Right.
So within Nigeria, our education educational authorities are not aware of that. They feel that integration is best for deaf children. But honestly, that does not work.
This is really fascinating to me, Godwin. Because of your commitment to this new method and the fact that, like all the IFP Fellows, you are also committed to going back to Nigeria and making this happen, you're going to need, obviously, government cooperation and support. You've just mentioned that it hasn't been, they haven't been so perceptive, perhaps, in the past. Are you hopeful about making them more sensitive to your approach?
Yes, yes. When I arrived here, the first thing I had done was to sensitize them. And how I did that, I would like to organize an international conference on ASL, English philosophy, the bilingual philosophy. After that conference, what I would do is to start something new. I would like to show them what that conference is actually about, how it applies. In that conference, we would have the educators there, and the administrators there, and the powers to be there, and even stakeholders would be there, those who are in the education sector. Also, I would like to invite the educational international people to come as presenters, so that they can come to the conference and provide more of a deliberation about this, so that we could all come together and actually start something.
Well, all I can say, Godwin, is that you persuade me. You really do. I think that's a marvelous way of demonstrating the ideas that you want to put into practice and bringing people along. Reminds me of something I read about you, that you have, in addition to matters educational, been a very strong advocate for deaf rights, that is to say, the inclusion of deaf people in all Nigeria. And I commend you very strongly on that. And maybe my last first question to you in this first part of our conversation is this. It seems to me that your whole philosophy revolves around inclusion, of making the whole country aware of that part of its population who is deaf and bringing everyone into the most productive interaction possible in Nigeria. Tell me if I get it right or wrong.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head. But really, I'd like to expand on that with inclusion or involvement. We need to have empowerment. So along with that inclusion, empowerment is essential. And the way we would do that is we would provide the deaf individuals with the best education possible. In Nigeria, we do not have legislation, but we have policies. So we need associations, such as deaf associations, to really pressure. It's like a pressure group, which will exert reminders on the minds of people to get things moving for the deaf community. And in that way, we are really changing things to benefit the deaf community.
That's wonderful, quite frankly. I take from you inclusion and empowerment have to go hand in hand. Godwin, thank you so much. We're, of course, going to come back to you and involve you. But with the basis of what you've said, let me turn now to Jing Kong. Jing, of course, comes from China. And you are pursuing your master's degree, I believe, at Columbia University in New York. Yeah. And you're also very interested in language, English language, of course, this time. And if I got it right, Jing, the more effective methods of teaching it in China. Yeah. Tell us a bit about why that's important to you, why you think this is a something of importance to China as well.
Because back in China, I used to be a teacher of English for 6 years in a middle school, and this is a school that's specialized in English teaching, and we often got confused about many questions like which kind of textbook to use or which kind of method to use. Bearing all those questions, I'm just, would like to seek questions here in USA, whether they really have the, theoretical support of what we have done or what we were doing before.
Now, you, I think, have conducted research and written papers on this whole issue of how English is taught. And in your studies at Columbia, I think we should address this right away. Are you finding the kind of courses that you need, that you expected to find to improve?
Yeah, definitely. I think the course I am studying, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages, is right the course I should be there. Because in this kind of course we learn something about how people acquire the second language and how the second language should be scientifically assessed. That's what actually the educational reform back in China is doing now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think traditionally we focus more on knowledge itself. That's put the teaching or learning in the center. But now we realize it's more important to cultivate or foster students' real ability, language ability. And another part of the reform is we realize the entrance examination for higher education in China somewhat at present we hinder the teaching and the learning back in the classroom. And so these two issues basically concerned with second language acquisition and second language assessment. So I'm very happy that I'm taking this course here in USA, and it really helps me a lot.
Just listening to you, I can see how you're making the very best use of it. It also sounds to me the government's committed to this. That you mentioned twice the government's education reform program, so there is an official interest in English education being made better. Is that right?
Yeah. Because both teacher or maybe we say the school authorities or educational committee in China, they realize that we have some problem in the daily teaching in the classroom. In terms of English, we realize that the traditionally focus more on just the mechanical drills on the grammar is not enough for students. We have to speak. We have to understand how the people, real English-speaking people, they say in their daily life. It's maybe different from the textbook and those test papers.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned the use of English in the speaking form and as a kind of a living ability. Because the real question, I think, Jing, comes in my mind, why is this important? I mean, is there a link that you can make between China's aspirations, which it's meeting to develop, and the use of English? Do the two go together?
Yeah, so we realize that, maybe students, they don't realize that the English actually, the purpose of learning English is not only for the, examinations or tests. It's for the communication between in a broader sense, it's two countries, that you have to communicate or understand another culture through the language.
Right.
And then, so it should be more emphasized on the real use of language instead of only the knowledge in the textbook.
A language is a living thing, not just an academic thing. That's very strong, and I think Pedro Mateo has an interest in that too. It strikes me also that it must have a lot to do, or could have a lot to do, with things like mobility. I mean, women's acquiring of English and other foreign languages, is that a way to move up in life?
Yeah, I think so. In China, because we know that China is developing very fast, and we kind of, are learning many things from the developed countries, which people in those developed countries, then they speak English. So we say the main key is you have to understand their language and then understand what they are doing and benefit from what they have done, the very useful experience. And also women in China, they are getting higher and higher position or ranks in like big company, especially international companies. And so English should be one of the key elements for them to entering higher position in the society.
Let me ask a follow-up question on that, and I do appreciate that. That, like your first answer, is very, very powerful to me. You as a woman, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of the effect of your own achievement as it goes. on other women in China and their aspirations? Do you feel they are looking at you as a model, perhaps, in terms of academic achievement in language through this fellowship?
I hope that my story can give them maybe some, encouragement or something to share. And I do realize that actually in China, women are getting, I think, relatively equal as men.
Good.
So hope that what I have learned here can bring back to them and share with them, so that more and more teachers, especially the colleagues of me, and also some my teachers from my brother and sister schools can share what I learned here, because maybe for them they don't have the opportunity or such precious opportunity given by IFP program. So basically, I hope I will be the bridge there to to bring the window maybe to them, to see what's happening here in USA.
I really appreciate that answer, and I appreciate your aspirations. I think they're going to be met. I can see you already as a very powerful model and influence. You influence me that way. Allow me then, if I may, to ask you a further question in this sort of very personal reaction to the IFP Fellowship. One of the goals set by this program, and all three of you represent this, is a kind of answer to what we call the brain drain. That is to say, people going abroad, getting well educated, and then staying abroad, and actually, in many cases, earning good money and such. You are committed to returning to China and working. Would you share with us why that's important to you, and meeting that program goal, going back to China, rather than just going on with your life?
So first of all, I have a very, I say, tightly bound with my home country. I just love what I used to do work back here in my hometown. I really hope that what I have learned, like I said just now, to share with them, with my, all the people back in my country. And I think from the data I know from the IFP program, most fellows, after graduation, they return to their country. I think maybe two things are very important. That's their criterion when they are screening those candidates, that they really choose people who have this passion and who have this devotion to their previous work related to social justice. Right. And another one is, I think that's all the candidates, they must have some previous working experience.
Exactly.
This kind of working experience, more than 3 years, I think, actually tightly bound them with their home country, with all the people back in their country. I think that's what encouraged me and really urged me to go back there.
I appreciate that, and your reference to the work, the social work, is a very important part of the program. And I like the way that you link it to your own reasons for returning to China, and it shows how this program seeks out that quality in its candidates as well as academic excellence. Thank you very much for that, Jing Kong. I really appreciate it. And that leads us, of course, to Lwin, Pedro, Mateo, who's also, like his colleagues, interested in language, but this time it's a different language and a different reason. You're at the University of Kansas, is that right, Pedro? And you are studying for your master's degree.
Actually, I just finished my master's degree and I started with the PhD program.
Congratulations. You're on your way to your PhD program. That's marvelous. And the goal, I believe, is to influence the teaching, and I hope I pronounce it correctly, of Canjobal, which is one of the Mayan languages of Guatemala. The question is an obvious one. Why is that important? Why are you going to get the doctorate and go back to Guatemala to do that?
Well, this started from my childhood, that when I went to school, the first language that I was taught, it's Spanish, which wasn't my native language. It wasn't my first language. So I couldn't get any sense from what's going on in the classroom. So since then, I started thinking, okay, maybe someday I can do something and change this story.
Right.
So that's the idea that I am after now with this the experience from universities and working in my community with children, and see how children start acquiring their native language mainly.
I've had the advantage of reading a paper that you wrote, and I recognized right off the bat how important children are to you. and the influence on children and on native speakers of Canjobal in Guatemala. Is there also a sense, Pedro, that the larger community of Guatemala, the rest of society and the government, should also be just as interested in this as you are, just as supportive?
Yeah, that's their main responsibility, I would say. But then in Guatemala, even though we have a lot of we have laws concerned with education, but it seems to me that they are applied in a low rate. So in most of the people who are speakers of Mayan language, let's say, they are the ones who wanted to promote their language, but not the government. So the government promotes more the teaching Spanish.
I see.
And not, let's say, recognizing the other Mayan languages. Yes, there is bilingual education in Guatemala, but then this kind of teaching of bilingual education is seen only in a few languages. So in Canjobal, for example, it's hard to see this. The teachers in this case talk about bilingual education only in kindergarten, just a transition, I would say, just making the children to start learning Spanish.
Right. Now, how would you, and I really, that's a very helpful answer, how can you influence that? I mean, you'll get the doctorate thanks to the IFP grant in your work, return to Guatemala. What are your plans beyond that? I mean, what ways would you make things happen?
Well, two things that I am planning to do is teaching and doing research. My main focus now is doing research, and I'm glad that you asked this question because I am involved in a project of documenting the acquisition of 3 Mayan languages. One is Chol, spoken in Mexico, and the other two are spoken in Guatemala, Mam and Canjobal, my native language. So the idea here is that with this project we want to collect data and show not only to teachers but other people who are interested in, let's say, in anthropology or other areas, to show them, well, we have this data. You can use this data and develop other ideas about the language or the culture. And so we want to show them and also support the bilingual education in Guatemala. One of the things that the weakness, I would say, of the bilingual education is that there is this lack of knowledge of the language of the children.
Right.
So yes, we want to do bilingual education, but we know little about the children's language. So that's the idea here, that we want to provide this support.
I have to say, as with your colleagues, it makes great sense to me. It really does, just sitting here listening to you. It also seems to me that your success in Guatemala could have a lot of influence and effect elsewhere in the world, where there's a need to both preserve traditional languages and culture and embrace the right aspects of modernity. Both things could be happening.
Well, I think that's the, if we can take this on different levels, that's the idea. We can help the community to preserve the language, but also help scholars to develop science in this case, or mainly in the linguistic area where I am, which I am interested now. So here in the US, for example, we have a lot of theories, and as one of my colleagues said, that there is a lot of theories that, in fact, for me, when I came in the US, it was a new thing for me. So, and one interesting thing that I want to point out here is that most of the theories based on language are based on English. And there is little that is known of other languages. So in this case, about Mayan language, it's just a little. So with this documenting the acquisition of Canjobal or these 3 languages will help at least to provide more data and bring data in discussion into this analysis, these theories maybe.
I think it definitely will, and I like the way you phrase that, because your work, the work of all of you, and in this regard, the work on Canjobal can help all of us here, and that's extremely important. I've talked to you each as individuals, but I'd love to address at least one question to all three of you together. And that is the sense, you are obviously individuals representing different countries and cultures, but you've come to be colleagues. And I guess I can't help but sit here and wonder if that's going to continue. Do you see connections being made in your work here as IFP Fellows? Will you be in contact in the future, do you think? Just even a one-sentence answer to that. I'll start with you, Jing Kong.
Yeah, we I mean, all the three, we study concerned with the education, although a little bit different, like Godwin is studying the sign language, and Pedro is studying the minor language, and I'm studying the second language. But it all, I think, in terms of helping the development of the country back there, we have the common interest in there.
Right.
I do think we may have the same problem that we can share and maybe find the the answer to the questions from each other's working experience.
That's excellent. Let me ask you, Godwin, do you agree with what Jing has said?
Yes, I do. We all study something in common, and that involves a second language, and teaching that to our native people or the people at our home. So we need to contact each other to know how their work is progressing, and maybe from that feedback we can get something to enhance my own work or our own work. So it's true, all of us, we do have common thread, but just a different spin on it.
Excellent. Pedro, would you like to make it unanimous? Do you feel
actually,
the same way?
it seems to me that our point here is social justice, where our work is toward this point, maybe with different ways.
Right.
But we're looking to the same, I don't find a word, but for the main reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're exactly right. Social justice achieved through education and progress for all of us. And I want to commend all three of you. I look forward to following your careers. I think they're going to be very interesting. And thank you for sharing your goals and your talents with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's our program. We appreciate your comments, and you can reach us at dialogue@wilsoncenter.org. I'm George Liston, CA, and you've been watching Dialogue, a co-production of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and MHC Networks. Dialogue's also on the MHC Worldview channel, which is available to public TV stations nationwide. For more information, go to www.mhcworldview.org. Please join us again right here next week, and thank you for watching. And thank all three of you. That was marvelous.